Imagine surviving a terrible accident and losing your memory of recent events. As you try to rebuild your life, the people around you slowly pull you into something dangerous that looks helpful at first, but could cost you everything. The story begins with Chris driving along a dark road with his girlfriend in the front seat and two friends riding in the back. They are in a carefree mood and decide to make the drive more exciting by continuing through the night. What starts as a fun trip quickly turns into a disaster when their car crashes into a broken-down combine that is stopped on the road. The accident is severe and changes everything for everyone involved. 4 years later, it is revealed that Chris and his girlfriend survived the crash, but the two friends in the back seat were killed. The couple does not stay together after the tragedy, and the situation becomes even more complicated because the girl loses her leg as a result of the accident. Chris is left dealing with serious emotional and mental struggles. He has ongoing anger problems and also suffers from memory issues that make it hard for him to remember recent events or form new memories. Because of this, he has to relearn simple daily activities and relies on writing everything down in a notebook to keep track of his life. Chris is also weighed down by strong feelings of guilt over the accident and the loss of his friends. In an effort to manage his condition and emotions, he regularly meets with his case manager, Janet. During one of their sessions, Chris crosses a line by making a crude and inappropriate suggestion toward her. His comment only makes his already difficult situation worse and creates more tension between them. It becomes clear that Chris has a condition that causes him to say inappropriate things without thinking, often involving sexual remarks. Janet immediately shuts him down and makes it clear that she is only there to help him professionally. She reminds him that there is no possibility of anything personal or romantic between them and reinforces her role as his case manager. Financially, Chris is not struggling because his family continues to support him. His mother tries to help in her own way by leaving him voice messages with advice, including tips on cooking. However, when Chris has trouble handling basic tasks like cooking, he becomes frustrated and angry. He loses his temper and starts kicking things around his house, showing how easily his emotions can spiral out of control. Chris lives with his blind roommate Lewis, who is one of the most stable and positive influences in his life. Lewis is always there to support him, especially during moments when Chris is upset or overwhelmed. Lewis helps take care of practical things like food, and his relaxed attitude and sense of humor help calm Chris down and pull him out of negative moods. During the day, Chris works the night shift as a janitor at a small city bank. At work, he is friendly with Ted, a sheriff's deputy who keeps an eye on him and looks out for him. While cleaning one night, Chris uses a mop like a hockey stick, turning a simple task into a small reminder of his past. This moment hints at who he used to be before the accident. A flashback reveals that Chris was once a very talented hockey player before his life changed. Since then, he has tried multiple times to convince the bank manager, Mr. Tuttle, to give him a job as a bank clerk instead of a janitor. Each time, Mr. Tuttle turns him down, refusing to offer him a better position. At the same time, a car parked across the street is watching the bank. Inside the car, a man named Gary recognizes Chris and mentions that he knows him. This sets up a connection that becomes important later. Later on, Chris is at a bar trying to talk to a woman sitting next to him. He struggles socially and comes across as awkward, failing to make a good impression. Gary then approaches and easily starts a conversation. He introduces himself as someone who went to school with Chris and talks about how he also used to be a great hockey player back in the day. When the bartender tries to overcharge Chris and keep his change, Gary steps in and gets Chris's money back. Even though Gary has asthma, Chris sees him as confident, charming, and socially skilled. These are qualities Chris feels he has lost since developing his condition, which makes Gary seem even more impressive to him. In the next part, Chris and Lewis go to Chris's family home for Thanksgiving. It is revealed that Chris comes from a wealthy, upper-class family. Despite this, he feels uncomfortable and unwelcome. His parents speak to him in a way that feels dismissive, and his brother openly mocks his clothes, his financial situation, and his abilities. The family gathering only highlights how disconnected Chris feels from them. During dinner, Chris and Lewis mention their plan to open a restaurant together. Instead of being supportive, Chris's father criticizes the idea. This pushes Chris over the edge, and he loses his temper, getting up and storming away from the table. Meanwhile, Chris's brother continues to show off to Lewis, bragging about his own business success and skills. After finally getting through the uncomfortable holiday visit, Chris and Lewis head back home. On the way, Lewis tells Chris that it would be better for him to stay away from his family in the future, seeing how much being around them hurts him emotionally. The next day, Chris returns to the same bar. This time, he tries to flirt with another woman by repeating the exact words Gary used before. While he is doing this, a different woman approaches him and offers to buy him a drink, saying it is from Gary. Chris and the woman start talking, and they begin sharing details about their lives, setting up a new connection and continuing the story forward. When Chris struggles to remember her name, Lovely quickly writes it down in his notebook so he will not forget. After that, the group heads over to Gary's place. While Gary and his girlfriend are spending time together in the bedroom, Chris and Lovely are left alone, and Chris starts to feel more drawn to her. Lovely opens up and tells him that she had a big crush on him back when he was a hockey player and that she used to watch his games at the rink. Chris, acting on impulse, makes an inappropriate comment about wanting to see her naked. He immediately feels embarrassed by what he said, but Lovely reassures him and tells him it is okay. The two of them then begin kissing. Later, Gary drives Chris back home. A luxury car is waiting to pick Gary up, showing that Gary is living a much different lifestyle. Before leaving, Gary tells Chris that he deserves a better life than the one he currently has. When Chris gets home, Lewis notices the smell of alcohol and perfume on him and realizes he has been out with someone. Chris excitedly tells Lewis about Gary's Spardo and about meeting Lovely, describing everything in detail. Lewis, however, does not fully trust Gary and seems doubtful about his intentions. Because of his growing connection with Gary, Chris is invited to a gathering at a barn owned by one of Gary's friends. A group of young people are there drinking beer, smoking, and hanging out. In the kitchen, Lovely and Gary's girlfriend are preparing food. When Lovely sees Chris, she greets him with affectionate kisses. Chris starts to mingle with everyone and tries to get comfortable in the group. Gary explains that the farmhouse belongs to someone named Uncle Bone. However, when an elderly man shows up using a walking frame, Chris begins to feel that something about the situation is off. Later that night, Chris wanders into the basement and notices several photos and materials related to a bank pinned on the wall. He is shocked to see his own picture included among them. It becomes clear that the group is planning to rob the bank, and the photos are part of their preparation. Gary then opens up to Chris about his struggles with money and talks about how having money means having control and influence. He brings up Chris's financial situation and points out that Chris's wealthy father refuses to help him start a business. Gary suggests that Chris's father wants to see him struggle. He even tells Chris that if he were in his position, he would call his father and ask for $10,000. Chris listens but does not respond. The next day, as Chris is leaving, Lovely is seen watching him from a window, looking concerned and emotional. Gary then hugs her, making it clear that they are in a relationship. Shortly after, Chris and Lewis meet with a financial advisor to discuss opening their own restaurant. The advisor tells them that their savings are not enough, and that they would likely not be able to cover the cost needed to run the business. A few days later, Chris comes home to find a stylish leather jacket that Lovely has sent him as a gift. That night, Chris calls his father and asks for $10,000 so he can start a small business focused on hockey training. His father refuses to send the money unless they meet in person to talk. Chris, expecting the conversation to be stressful and unproductive as usual, rejects the idea and hangs up. Feeling cornered and desperate to change his situation, Chris decides to take part in the planned robbery with Gary's group. The following day, Chris supplies the group with a steel tank needed for welding so they can break into the safe. He then goes to work and secretly takes photos of the safe to send to the group. While doing this, Deputy Ted suddenly appears and catches him. Chris quickly makes up an excuse, claiming that he wants a picture with the safe to show his family. Even though it seems like Ted might arrest him, Ted instead decides to take the photo himself, surprising Chris and letting him off the hook. That night, the group studies the photos and discusses how to break into the safe. Chris is assigned the role of lookout, which is especially important because Deputy Ted's schedule is unpredictable, making it hard to plan around him. Back at Chris's place, Chris and Lovely spend time together. When Chris falls asleep, Lovely quietly leaves the room. Lewis, who has been awake and worried, talks with her in private. During our conversation, Lewis reveals that he lost his eyesight while working in an illegal lab due to poor ventilation. He explains that he and others were trying to get rich quickly, and the accident cost him his vision. Lewis tells Lovely that he believes she and Gary are manipulating Chris and pulling him into dangerous and illegal activities. He urges her to admit it and to leave Chris alone. Lovely responds by saying that she truly cares about Chris and becomes angry at Lewis, insulting him during the argument. Unknown to them, Chris is awake and hears their confrontation. Back at the bank, Chris is later visited by Deputy Ted, who stops by after taking his pregnant wife to the hospital. This visit adds more tension to Chris's situation, as he is now deeply involved in something that could put him at serious risk. Chris uses the conversation with Ted to act irritated by the way Ted has been showing up at the bank. He makes it seem like Ted's frequent visits could cause problems, hoping this might keep Ted away on the night of the robbery. Ted takes this to heart and feels bad, even though his intentions were friendly. The exchange leaves Ted feeling guilty and more careful around Chris. Later, Chris and Lewis are at a restaurant. While Lewis is talking and flirting with a waitress, Chris suddenly snaps at him. He tells Lewis that his behavior is embarrassing and then drops the news that he is planning to move out soon. This hurts Lewis deeply, and he reacts by asking for the check before their food even arrives. The waitress is left confused when Lewis suddenly ignores her, showing how tense things have become between the two friends. At the same time, Lovely is shown riding in a cab. She appears worried about Chris and feels uneasy about what is happening in his life. Back at the bank, Chris gets unexpected news. Mr. Tuttle approaches him and agrees to give him the bank clerk position he had asked for before. He also apologizes for treating Chris unfairly in the past, explaining that he now understands more about Chris's mental condition. This offer comes just before the robbery is about to take place. adding to Chris's inner conflict. As the robbery approaches, Chris becomes overwhelmed with anxiety. He calls Lewis and admits that he has made a terrible mistake and regrets what he is involved in. When he hints at trouble, Lewis assumes it is just another episode related to Chris's condition. Lewis tells him he will be home in an hour to help clean up whatever mess Chris is talking about, not realizing the real danger. Not long after, Uncle Bone appears at the bank and knocks on the glass door. Chris tries to back out of the plan and tells Gary that he will not go through with it. Gary responds with violence and threats, making it clear that Chris will be killed if he does not cooperate. With no real way out, the robbery moves forward. Inside the bank, Marty begins working on breaking into the vault by drilling and melting through the wall. The group is suddenly warned that Deputy Ted is on his way. Gary hands Chris a gun and tells him to be ready to use it if necessary. When Ted arrives, he casually talks to Chris and mentions that it is his last night on duty because his baby is about to be born. Chris apologizes for how he treated Ted earlier, and Ted accepts the apology kindly, unaware of what is really happening. Once the vault is opened, Chris is told to carry the money out, and he does. The cash is loaded into the trunk of a car. Shortly after, Ted comes to the bank door looking for Chris. He does not see him at first, but then notices Gary's reflection in the glass. A shootout breaks out. Ted quickly kills 2 members of the group and shoots Gary as well. He orders Gary to put his hands on his head. Chris tries to warn Ted that Uncle Bone is standing behind him, but Ted is too focused and overwhelmed to understand. Gary gives the order, and Ted is shot. Uncle Bone uses the distraction to finish Ted off. Gary manages to escape through the back door by taking a car, leaving Chris behind. Ted's death hits Chris hard, reminding him of the past mistakes and losses in his life. He breaks down, overwhelmed with guilt and grief. While driving away in shock, Chris is pulled over by another police officer. In a rush of emotion, he blurts out that he caused his friends to die. Because of his known mental condition, the officer does not take the confession seriously and even offers to escort him home. After pulling over again, Chris discovers a bag and a shovel along with the stolen money. He realizes that Gary may have planned to set him up and kill him to take all the money. Chris drives near Gary's place and calls him, saying he knows about the plan to have him killed. Uncle Bone suddenly rushes at Chris and starts shooting, but Chris manages to escape. Looking through his notebook, Chris connects the dots, remembering Gary's words about money being power. Now that he has the money, Chris understands he is in danger and decides he must stop Gary and Uncle Bone to save Lewis, who is being held hostage. During a tense phone call, Gary, still injured and angry, demands to know where the money is. Chris refuses to give the location and instead demands that Lewis be released safely first. Gary threatens that Lewis will be killed if Chris does not cooperate. The pressure pushes Chris to his breaking point. Chris later imagines a conversation with his ex-girlfriend Kelly. In his mind, he apologizes for how the accident ruined her life, and he finds some comfort in imagining her forgiving him. This moment of imagined closure gives him strength to keep going. Soon after, Chris and Lewis are found by members of the gang and are badly beaten. It is revealed that Lovely was never truly on Chris's side and was working with the group the entire time. Chris claims he has forgotten where he hid the money, but Gary uses Chris's notebook to figure out the location. They all go to the spot where the money is hidden. When Uncle Bone receives the cash, Gary signals for him to kill Chris and Lewis. Uncle Bone forces Lewis to his knees and points a gun at his head. As the moment turns deadly, Chris shoots Uncle Bone and kills him. Instead of killing Gary, Chris throws him an inhaler to help him breathe, choosing not to finish him off. Chris turns the money in and confesses his involvement. The authorities later learn that the robbery was recorded because Marty cut the wrong wire, causing the security cameras to stay on. This evidence helps clear up what really happened. Chris later takes a loan from Mr. Tuttle and finally opens the restaurant with Lewis. In the end, Chris feels more stable in his new life. He continues his therapy and mental health classes and even starts skating again. His father and Mr. Tuttle become regular customers at the restaurant, showing a slow improvement in his relationship with them. Even though he is moving forward, Chris still holds on to one main hope. He wants to truly face Kelly again someday and earn her forgiveness, while also learning how to forgive himself for the past.